What is going on, everybody? Um, it is me, Brad Graham. You got Jordan Elliott on the other side of this screen. He's getting some some of his lighting figured out, but he'll be right here really quick to join us. Really excited for this conversation because obviously the 49ers are coming off a huge win against the Rams on Monday Night Football. Jordan was with me in the stands at Levi's Stadium on Monday. The vibe was immaculate. Um, I'll get Jordan up here when he's ready to go. But I'm really excited to talk to Jordan, get his insights. It was super fun watching the game with Jordan because he called out a bunch of different things. Specifically, one of the plays that we'll get into is the going on it on fourth down. He had some really great insight in game in the moment, and he kind of called his shot. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about how that will translate and evolve into the Jaguars game. But I'm excited to get Jordan in here. I think he's ready to go. If he's ready to go, you give me thumbs up because I can see him down on my little screen. He's good to go. Let's get my guy in here. How we doing, Jordan? What's the vibe? What's the vibe today?
It is much better than last week. That is for sure. I thought that, for obvious reasons, like there haven't been very many games at home that they've played well since, basically the start of last season. But having been at the NFC Championship game at Levi's, I have not felt that kind of energy at that stadium since then. So that was really fun. It was just nice to go to a game and leave smiling for the first time in like a year and a half.
Absolutely. It was so much damn fun there. The vibe was immaculate at Levi's Stadium. Like you said, it was both of us were at the NFC Championship game in 2020 against Green Bay. Again, one of the best football environments I've been, at least in a pro sporting event. So it was really awesome to see that same vibe kind of pick back up on Monday night, especially too amidst kind of them losing. It kind of felt like there might not be a lot of people in the stands, but a lot of people showed up and were there to support. And as a result, we kind of saw the momentum swing a bit after we dipped back down against the Cardinals. Just give me a high level overview of kind of your thoughts of the game, and then we'll start drilling down individually.
Well, I thought that they obviously got off to a great start. They got the turnover on the first series of the game, obviously. It didn't really do much for them in terms of field position, obviously, because it put them inside their own 10-yard line. But I think that it gave them a little bit of a boost. Obviously, the defense hasn't really gotten that many turnovers, not just this season, but in general. But the tone really got set on that first 18 play drive that they had. That really I think they ran it 13 out of the 18 plays on that drive, really set the tone. And I think just physically, they came out and played a brand of football that I've been waiting to see all year, where you really saw them dominate in the trenches on the offensive line, really control the clock, run the ball, and then execute on third down. All in all, it was a complete team win. And it was kind of just on Friday, I remember, I don't know if any of them are watching, but I remember there's a lot of people in the chat that were all doom and gloom and were saying that we didn't know what we were talking about because we're like, hey, this team's pretty good if they stay out of their own way. Lo and behold, they didn't turn the ball over and they end up beating one of the best teams in the entire league by 21 in a game that they pretty much controlled from start to finish. So, I'm not one for taking victory laps or rubbing things in, but I do, take great pride in the fact that clearly you and I weren't wrong in our assessment that the team had talent. They just really were their own biggest enemy all season. And it's pretty easy to say, it's not like we're geniuses for being like, hey, if you don't turn the ball over, your chances of winning are better. But it wasn't just the lack of turnovers. It was the fact that they weren't getting these crippling penalties. They weren't gifting free possessions. They weren't making, they weren't like the Arizona game. They couldn't tackle anybody. If they just go out and play, their talent is good enough to play with anybody. And that's what we said last week, is that on paper and on the field, they're as talented as anybody. So that is my biggest overview from this. It's kind of like that Dennis Green quote, they are who we thought they were. It just took 10 weeks into the season for us to finally see it come to fruition.
Right. And we saw it come to fruition almost right away, at least on the offensive side of it. We saw the opening drive. I believe it was about 11 minutes Um, I'm getting the numbers mixed up, but it was is essentially just a almost a season defining drive in regards to how it was executed, the methodical nature of it, getting the run game going and like right off the bat. Tell me about that opening drive, what your thoughts were, and just like how they can take that momentum and continue to build off of it.
Well, I just think it's kind of, I've been thinking a lot about it, and for weeks, or they've played a couple teams that weren't great against the run, and I'm like, oh man, this is the week that they'll break out running the ball. This is the week they'll do it. The Rams, they've done it for a couple years. I was actually listening to Jake Hutchinson, who writes for KMBR. He's great. He's Hutch Diesel, I believe, on Twitter. For those of you who are on there, he's great. He was on with Dieter Kurtenbach the other night, and he was talking about how the Rams linebackers just aren't very good. And that's something that, I've talked about for a while too, that it seems like it's a position that they just don't really like value. They put a lot of stock into the D line. They put a lot of stock into the secondary, obviously, but they've kind of largely ignored the linebacking group. And I honestly wonder if that's why the 49ers year after year are able to have success. Like they even, they won games with Nick Mullins. They won games with Jimmy on his hobbled ankle last year. Like every year we come into these games where the Rams look like the better team on paper or they're favored. And for whatever reason, they can't stop. And I'm wondering if it really is just as simple as they just don't have good linebackers. And when you talk about how important the linebackers are against the Niners, it's not just the run. It's also having to defend on base downs against the pass and having to defend in short yardage situations where you can't really come out in a nickel defense on 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 4 because they'll just run it right up the middle at you. So what we saw was Deebo Samuel and George Kittle eating over the middle of the field. We all know that's where Jimmy Garoppolo loves to play and loves to live, is in between the numbers, in between the hashes. And I'm honestly wondering if it really just is as simple as everything the 49ers do is amplified in a good way if the opposing team doesn't have good linebackers. And the Rams not only don't have good linebackers, they have just pretty much like awful linebackers. Like their linebacking group has been awful for a couple seasons now. And I genuinely think that it might be as something as simple as that, is that's why the 49ers are having this kind of success. So I want to see it translate against a team that maybe is a little bit stronger up the middle, but you have to be encouraged. Like the Rams are one of the best teams in the league, like we said, and they like manhandled them. It felt like from the beginning of the game they had that game under control. So
Absolutely. And to be able to stop zone run schemes, you need really good linebackers who have really genuine feel uh, for these running backs and being able to avoid blockers because for the blocking scheme, their offensive linemen in his own scheme are constantly trying to double the guy in front of them and peel to backer. And so when you can do that and you can accomplish that, that's how you set up your running backs to read the lanes and find the holes, and we were seeing some success with that. And I think that's a great point. I honestly didn't really think about that, but it is something that I noticed. Number 51, the linebacker for the Rams, he's getting eaten up a little bit. He's being out of position from time to time. And when you're not in position, especially with the zone style running game, it could put you at a big disadvantage. Obviously, we saw Elijah Mitchell run for 27, take 27 carries for 91 yards. We saw Jeff Wilson as well, uh, but we'll kind of talk about the Rams game and kind of transition it as well into the Jags game just for this particular topic because it is sounding like Elijah Mitchell won't be available. He is doubtful with his finger, didn't practice today, so it is kind of trending like Elijah Mitchell won't be up for game day. So that might mean Jeff Wilson is up. What were your thoughts of Elijah Mitchell, the return of Jeff Wilson, the running game, and all that good stuff?
I think honestly, Jeff Wilson is just a guy that he has a lot of familiarity with the scheme, as you know. And I think the biggest thing, Elijah Mitchell's been really good for the last couple weeks. So that is, kind of it's a good thing. Like, first of all, I want to make it very clear. I'm very happy. He's played much better since the Colts game was really when he started to turn around. The Colts game, Chicago, Arizona, and then obviously this most recent game against the Rams. Prior to that, there was an issue I thought where I thought he was leaving a lot of yards on the field. And again, it comes back to I said it at the time, and it's funny because there are some people that misconstrued it as me saying that he was like bad or wasn't playing well. I just he wasn't being as efficient with his touches as he could have been. He was leaving a lot of yards on the field, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's a rookie running back, and it's all about getting a feel for where your blocks are going to be, feeling out, the tendencies of the guys blocking in front of you, just getting accustomed to the speed and how quickly holes open and close at the NFL level. And I felt very vindicated in that because Mike McDaniel came out recently and said, yeah, at the beginning of the year, he was leaving some yards on the field. There were some areas that could have been more efficient. And I think Kittle said recently too that, yeah, he's still learning how, guys in front of us, like he's learning how we basically block for him in front of him. So I think I just want to put that out there that while Elijah Mitchell has been really great the last few weeks, he also still is a rookie. So back to Jeff Wilson, the reason why I mentioned that about Mitchell, Jeff Wilson isn't a rookie. Jeff Wilson's been around for a while, and we've seen Jeff Wilson have those big games. Obviously, that game in New England last year, he was fantastic. So I think even though he's probably, still getting back to, game speed and game conditioning and all that, as much work as you do off the field, it does take a little bit of time to get back into that 100% game shape. Just having a guy that understands the blocking speed or the blocking speed, how quickly, again, these holes open and close, and just the familiarity after running behind these guys for a couple seasons. I think he'll be okay. Obviously, it's a bummer that Mitchell's out, but the fact that he was playing through a broken finger and nobody even really knew it kind of is a testament to how tough he is. So I think the 49ers will be able to weather the storm for a little bit. The stuff with Trey Sermon, honestly, if Jeff Wilson's carrying the ball efficiently, I'm not really concerned. I wouldn't be upset at all if Sermon doesn't touch the ball once, if that's the case. I know people want to see him play, but again, there's usually a reason why they're not giving these guys touches. Maybe he's not feeling his gaps properly. Maybe he's not, maybe he's coughing the ball up in practice. I don't know. It's just speculation, but having Jeff Wilson being able to step in now at this point in the season with presumably fresh legs, even though he's, technically coming off an injury, is a huge boost. So the Jaguars aren't a team I would overlook, and especially with the 10 a.m. start on the East Coast, cross-country flight, short week, all that stuff. But I would be surprised if the running game had a massive drop-off simply because it went from Elijah Mitchell to Jeff Wilson.
100%. And both of you and I have been watching the tape all year. Obviously, I'm big into the offensive line and big into the correlation of how running backs run behind offensive line, especially in the zone scheme. And all the things that you're talking about are correct. And they have all been reiterated, like you said, by McDaniel, by Kittle, for the majority of the year. And with just those limited 10 carries that we saw from Jeff Wilson, you saw that ability, that next level ability that I think Elijah Mitchell can work up to, Trey Sermon can work up to, but right now Jeff Wilson has it. Like you said, he's got fresh legs coming off the injury, and he's already got the vision. He's already got the feel. He knows how to run behind this offensive line. He knows how to set up blocks. He knows how to cut back. And it was really beautiful because although he had 10 carries on 28 yards, they were all self-created. There was really nothing. He was running into basically a stone wall, but his ability to set up blocks and cut back against the grain, you can see how with some additional carries and additional workload, um, just like you said, I really don't see an opportunity where it's going to be a huge drop off. In fact, I actually see a world where the team benefits from it, and they actually might even run the ball a little bit more efficiently and effectively than what we've seen with Elijah Mitchell. And that's again not taking away from Elijah Mitchell and what he's capable of, but we get asked the question all the time. Where's Trey Sermon? Why isn't Trey Sermon playing? I can only go back to what I saw on tape, and if you go back to the Green Bay game, he struggled with reading his lanes and setting up blocks, finding cutback lanes and things like that. And when you're running zone schemes, it's super important. So 100% Jordan. I think we're going to see something good hopefully here. And but like you said, we're also looking at the matchup against the Jags. They do have better linebackers, probably better edge at this point. I would say Josh Allen probably better than Bob Miller at this point in his career. So we'll see how that occurs. What were your thoughts of Deebo Samuel getting some rushes behind that offensive line? 5 carries for 36 yards. Did the wicked cutback for a touchdown. What did you think of Deebo Samuel as a rusher, and then expand on him as a wide receiver and what he's been and meant to this team this year?
Well, I think first of all, as great as it was for their win Monday night, I think what it does going forward is even better because now teams, when they see Deebo lined up in the backfield, their first thought is immediately going to be, okay, well, they're finding a way to get him the ball, whether it's going to be a toss play, whether they're giving a misdirection, some kind of zone running. Like immediate thought is going to be, okay, well, they're putting Deebo in the backfield. Clearly, this is a play designed for him. And that little second of hesitation helps. Like, that's what influences this play action so much, is that hesitation of, respecting the fact that this guy getting the ball behind the line of scrimmage has been torching defenses. You're seeing it on film going into games. So it's not necessarily what it did against the Rams. It's what it's going to do going forward, because I think beyond just him touching the ball, the threat of him touching the ball is so much more magnified when he's in that spot there, because it's much easier to get a guy the ball right behind the line of scrimmage than it is lining up as a wideout. So as a runner, he's fantastic. He's built like, I saw somebody say he's like the size of Percy Harvin, but built like Anquan Bolden, and I thought that was a very good description of kind of who he is as a player. But it's beyond just like the size and how hard he is to tackle. It's just the instinct the guy has, and like one thing that he does that really stands out to me is whenever he runs on the sideline, his feel for staying in bounds and getting an extra 4 or 5 yards when it literally looks like he's like half an inch from stepping out of bounds, but somehow maintaining his balance. Like, the guy is just very gifted with the ball in his hands. And that's the most like oversimplified way I could put it. But it's beyond just being, gifted. It's having that like mental acumen to understand where your blocks are going to be, to understand where these gaps are going to be, to have the patience to let them develop. When you're a wide receiver, when you're not getting reps in the running back room, when you're not getting a ton of work behind the line of scrimmage in practice, like the ability to just kind of step in and inherently do that is super special. And then like as a receiver, when you go back and you watch this season, most of the stuff that Deebo's had thrown his way that you would consider like 50-50 balls or, up for grabs or kind of not, where he's just running wide open, it seems like he comes down with every single contested catch that's been thrown at him this season. And I think that's super impressive because he's not the biggest guy. I think he's listed at 6 foot. I think he's closer to like 5'10", 5'11". I could be wrong. With all due respect, if I am wrong, I apologize, Deebo, but he just doesn't look like a guy that's above 6 feet tall, but he plays so much bigger than that. And that's where, again, you don't want to get caught up in measurables. You want to get caught up in production. And his production this year has just been insane when you consider he's I think he's like 19 yards away from 1,000 9 games into the season. That's just incredible. And that's something we haven't seen in a 49ers receiver really like this level of dominance since Terrell Owens almost 20 years ago. And so I think that the way that he and Jimmy Garoppolo have developed this, connection this year, because obviously, they've looked to get Deebo the ball in the past. He was a huge part of what they did in 2019. He had some big games last year, but I think that there's been a huge increase in trust between him and Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think that that's where you're seeing like that fourth down play. I thought was one of the best throws I've ever seen Jimmy Garoppolo make because he threw it before Samuel came uncovered, and the trust he had in Samuel to get there is something that hasn't really been there for not just Deebo, but like any 49ers receiver, really. I felt like Emmanuel Sanders was the last receiver that Jimmy really trusted that way. So I think just their relationship as a whole, and I think, I forget if it was Kyle or one of the players, somebody said that they thought during training camp that he took a huge step forward, kind of being a leader. Because if you look at that receiving room, obviously Mohamed Sanu is a seasoned veteran. Sherfield's been around the league a little bit. But, when you have Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk and these guys, like Deebo's like pretty quickly turning into kind of like the vet in that room, particularly out of guys that are getting the ball a lot. So I think it's not just his play on the field, but his whole just, development from young guy coming into the league and taking them by storm to kind of like, beating teams as much mentally as he is physically has really had him blossom into this guy that can be, I hate to put it this way because I think they both have that potential, but he's kind of taken that leap, and Brad and I talked about it, that a lot of us expected Brandon Ayuk to make, where he looks like this alpha number one wide receiver that's going to be terrorizing teams week in and week out for the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. Deebo's been a menace. He's been snatching all the chains this year. He's probably got like 15 to 20 chains under his belt at this point because he's making people look silly. Let's talk about I do want to get your input and what you saw leading up to that fourth down play. Because again, like I was talking about earlier, we were in the stadium, we were watching it live, and I want to give you your credit. You saw something, you called it out before the third down play was even snapped. You're like, man, you need to set this up. I'll let you tell the story, but tell me what you saw going into that third down and then how it translated into the fourth down and just kind of your whole thought process because like being able to sit there next to you and listen to you kind of talk through it it was pretty cool to watch. So I just wanted to get your thought process on that little sequence that we had there.
So I believe it was like 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 6 or something like that. And the 49ers had a decent lead. But the way it felt was, so they were around like the 41, 45 yard line, something like that. I'm sorry, my details are a little bit fuzzy, but they're basically in a spot where I was looking at it and I told Brad, I was like, if this is me, I'm not punting if they don't get the 4th down here. It's obviously too far out. Robbie Gould's not kicking a 60-yard field goal. So it's me. I'm sitting there. I'm probably going to try to run up the middle and, make it a more manageable 4th down because I do think that they have 2 plays to get the 1st down here. And if it's me, so I said that right before this, and then they run this little inside zone to Jeff Wilson there, and they stayed on the field for 4th down. So I'm like, oh, okay. So like, they're going for it. And my whole thought
I
process
was
here
like,
is
oh, he called it. I was like, Jordan called it. You got it.
you're up 17. Like, if you don't get it, like, okay, yeah, it might be a little bit of a momentum swing for the Rams. They have a little bit shorter of a field, but you're still up 3 scores. And I think realistically, if you end up punting there, the difference of 15, 20 yards of field position really, it does not outweigh the benefit of converting. And not only did they convert, he hit Samuel in stride with, again, one of the best throws that I've ever seen Jimmy make. And they turned it into 7 points. And that pretty much was the dagger in the game at that point. Obviously, it's not over till zeros were on the clock. But I love that aggressive mentality that Shanahan had. I write for Niners Nation, and I wrote, before the game, we do like roundtables. And the thing this week was how can the 49ers beat the Rams this week? And each staff writer had a different topic. And mine that I chose was they need to be aggressive on 4th downs. I admittedly assumed it was going to be a much closer game. So my whole thinking was that they just need to maximize the possessions they get. And what I worded in my article was if you're faced in a 4th and short in a favorable spot on the field, which would definitely be your opponent's 40-yard line, 4th and less than, 6 or 7, Kyle Shanahan needs to immediately go to his play sheet and think about what can I run. He needs to not spend any time thinking, should I go for it? Should I be conservative? What should I do? And I thought the fact that he immediately went to a play that he trusted, they lined up there in trips, they ran something over the middle that they knew Jimmy felt comfortable running right between the hashes. Again, Jimmy is very good throwing between the numbers, particularly between the hashes. So I just think that it really embodied the Kyle Shanahan that I've been hoping to see, because as much as I am a fan of Kyle Shanahan's, one of my biggest criticisms of him is that he's been way too conservative for way too long. And I understood it a little bit in 2019. And if this was 2019, they probably punt here because they're like, you know what? You have to throw the ball. Good luck scoring 3 times in 10 minutes on this, ferocious pass rush and this defense that's a little bit more complete. But I thought that he did a good job adjusting this year and adjusting on this particular series and going, you know what? I'm going to kind of like, it wasn't like they were trying to win the game. It was like they were trying to, snatch the soul and the like spirit out of the Rams in that sideline. And that's been the biggest difference. Everybody remembers like the disrespectful Kyle stuff and all that. Like, this was the first time all year where it really felt like, okay, like Kyle's got a little bit of swagger in his step. He's got a little bit of, little bit of sauce with that play calling. Like, it's not just, playing scared and playing not to lose. And that's how what I would end this little rant with is it felt like for the first time all season, they played to win rather than playing not to lose. And shockingly, they had really good results as a result of that thought process.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love everything that you just said. You said it so beautifully. And again, look at where they were at on this play. It's 4th and 6, like you said, in favorable field position. There's still 11 minutes on the clock and only up 3 scores. Or we saw what happened against Detroit. We've seen the collapses. And again, that's part of the knock on Kyle Shanahan, right? And so again, you brought it together super eloquently to again show just simply of the difference between maybe what we've seen earlier in the year, what we've seen in the past versus kind of a different form or mentality of being aggressive. And on top of that, this is the outcome of it. And it really felt like the nail in the coffin. It really felt like, you know, it was getting to that point in the game where it's like, man, are they going to win this? Like, are they going to actually pull this off? But again, we all have our PTSD. We've been there. We've lived it in the past, even this year, where the big lead that we did have against Detroit, we almost flushed it down the toilet because we weren't as aggressive. We were a little bit more timid. Like, it's in the bag. We got it. So to all the points that you made, 100%. And that's what's so cool about it, because I'm watching, you're telling me that thought process in real time as we're coming up to a third down play. And the what to watch it all unfold, while you're kind of spitting it and talking about it to me right next to me in game. It was really cool to watch. And it was it was a really cool moment to, again, because they were going for it on fourth, and I'm like, oh, let's go, Jordan. They're going for it. And then it turns into this play. Again, let's break down the play a little bit. Talk to me about Jimmy Garoppolo, man. Talk to me about the confidence that you see from Jimmy Garoppolo, because I think what this play is a really good play to kind of be emblematic of the 49ers entire performance against the Rams. Just tell me what you saw from Jimmy, and again, how it is kind of showcased here.
Well, recently in the last couple of weeks, on the majority, like the heavy majority of their passing plays, Garoppolo's throwing out of shotgun, and that's what they did a lot in New England. You'll see they still do it with Mac Jones to this day. Um, and I'm wondering, for a long time, the running game was so successful that you could kind of live with him having his back to a defense and running play action from under center. But with the way that the run game has struggled a little bit this year, or I don't say struggle, but the way it's been different. They've had to adjust. I think that Kyle made a great adjustment in kind of going, hey, maybe throwing with his back to the defense isn't conducive and I'm not getting the results that I need from him. But maybe he looked inward and said, I need to put my quarterback in a better position to maximize his strengths. Because if you go back, this goes back to the Chicago game, I believe. And in those three games, the Chicago game, Arizona game, and then this game, Jimmy Garoppolo's objectively played like pretty well. Like, yeah, he's not, carrying the team, throwing for 450 and driving them down the field, and but he's doing enough to win, and he's doing enough to not put them in a position to lose. And I think that he deserves his credit. I've said on here multiple times, nobody knows me, I'm not the biggest fan of Jimmy Garoppolo. I think he's just kind of like an average run of the mill quarterback. But I also think he deserves credit when credit is due, and he's just played really well the last couple weeks. And I think, again, it's the confidence that he has throwing from the shotgun, seeing these plays develop in the quick pass game. He got the ball out in 2.3 seconds on average in this game, which in the NFL is pretty fast. Like that's, you're pretty much looking, reacting. And I think if you put Jimmy in a spot where he can react and he doesn't have to think too much, and I say that like respectfully, I'm not trying to say he's not capable of doing it. I just think sometimes when he has too much time, he tends to overthink things, and you see him double pumping with the ball. You see his feet get a little anxious. But when he's able to confidently stand in the pocket, make a quick read and react throw, the results are way better. And a lot of this does come back to play calling too. The fact that they were able to scheme this look up, like so much of what Kyle Shanahan does, and I think a lot of people that have been his biggest critics choose to ignore or don't understand, is getting a look like that, understanding what coverage you're probably going to see, and getting because again, he has to throw with anticipation here. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that was just some easy throw for Jimmy Garoppolo to make, but getting a look for your quarterback on fourth down from a clean pocket where he can make a quick read and throw directly in front of him to a receiver that's going to be running in stride into the open field. Like, so much of that has to do with play calling. And I know that there's times where people want to say, Kyle is the only reason Jimmy is good. And I think he helps Jimmy out a lot. But at the same time, Jimmy executed. Deebo is in the right spot. He ends up breaking through the tackles. Like, it's the first time all year we've really seen this offense operating with a synchronicity that's has them playing at a high level. And like, it's crazy because if you look at advanced stats and stuff, like their DVOA, I think they're like the third offense in the league or something like that. And we've seen a lot of this stuff all season. The problem is that they just have been turning the ball over like crazy. And this game, when they were able to take care of the football, like I said, shocking. They win by 21 points and they dominate one of the better teams in the league. So I think just going forward, like I haven't really been concerned with the offense all year. It's been more so just like them getting out of their own way. And until they do it for a couple weeks in a row, I won't feel great about it. But again, I do feel very validated that I've been trying to say all year, like, hey, like they are a good football team. I understand people saying like, well, your record is who you are. Like, I don't necessarily agree with that because Atlanta's won 4 games this year. And I don't know anybody who watched that Monday night game or Thursday night game last night that would look at the Atlanta Falcons and say they're as good of a team as the San Francisco 49ers are. So yes, the results matter and hypotheticals don't count in the standings. But with this much season left, I think it was unfair to write the 49ers off because they lost a couple close games they should have won. I think that it's fair to not have given them the benefit of the doubt, but it's way too soon to write them off. And I think Trent Williams said something like that coming off the field. He said something like they counted us out or they wrote us off or something like that. And maybe that mentality is what these guys needed to light a fire under them. But yeah, just overall, I just keep it coming back to, like, this is what I expected to see from them for the majority of this season. And it makes me really happy to know they're capable of it. And maybe now that they're aware of that, that carries over going forward, where they have that confidence to say, hey, if we beat the Rams, we should be able to bulldoze the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Houston Texans and some of these teams that they have left on the schedule.
And I really think you hit on an important point about the time that Jimmy was throwing in. You said 2.3, which I believe led the league that week. Um, the average in the NFL time to throw is 2.5 seconds. And the reason why that's important, because that translates to the guys up front. And when it translates to the guys up front, you have an example right here where you've got Daniel Brunskill, you have Aaron Donald in a one-on-one situation. This is what the Rams want. The Rams want this right here. They want this matchup. They want one-on-one, because that's where Aaron Donald goes to work. When you hold the ball for 2.5 seconds or longer, it really puts your offensive line at a disadvantage. There are instances where we've seen that from Jimmy Garoppolo in this year. And again, you touched on them throwing out of shotgun more. Again, puts less emphasis on the offensive line to block longer. And you can scheme things open a little bit differently. And again, this kind of process of getting the ball out quickly, it helps your guys up front, because look at Brunskill. Brunskill does a really good job. And again, this is Brunskill's technique. He moves back and then he anchors. That's just how it works. It looks like he's getting pushed back, but that's a good rep. That's a good rep from Brunskill. Everyone up front to keep a clean pocket. And again, to your point, Jimmy Garoppolo is in his bag in the sense, because look at the way he throws with this anticipation. The ball, he's decided to throw the ball right here. Look at where the DB is. Look at where Deebo is. He's ready to go. And that's confidence. That's the type of Jimmy that we like to see. And if the coaching staff can continue to get this out of him, and we keep running plays that fit the style of the offense, fit everyone's kind of personalities, understanding, with Tom Compton and Daniel Brunskill, we're not a 7-step drop back team where we're just gonna, drop it back, run like deep in breaking routes and all this kind of stuff. It's going to be something that needs to be a little bit more efficient and quick. So I think you hit on a lot of really, really, really good points there. What was your overall thought process of the offensive line? We had obviously the left side doing work this week, but you had Tom Compton, you had Jalen Moore get some reps as well. What was just your overall thought process of the offensive line group? And you could even include Juszczyk and George Kittle at this point, because I consider them essentially offensive linemen because of how much they block for this team. What was your whole thoughts of the whole blocking scheme and the guys up front?
Well, first of all, I have to touch on it. This continued ownage that Daniel Brunskill has on Aaron Donald, I swear to you, is one of the most bizarre and strange things, not only in the NFL, but I follow most pro sports pretty closely. I can't think of a player that's, Daniel Brunskill is a decent player. He's not terrible, but I'm trying to think of another sport where a guy is just kind of a run of the mill player that just dominates Hall of Fame, once in a generation kind of player. It's like a utility player in baseball hitting 450 against Greg Maddux or something like that, where you're just how? Every time these guys match up, this guy who, again, he's decent. I'm not one of these people that thinks Daniel Brunskill is awful, but I definitely don't think he's on Aaron Donald's level at all if you compare each of their individual talents. But every single time it seems like they match up since Brunskill's moved to right guard, he just, for whatever reason, has Donald's number. And it continued again in this game. And to me, beating Aaron Donald is literally just keeping your quarterback on his feet and not getting beat. That man is so talented that if you're able to do that, even if you're, ceding a little ground on your pass sets and you're giving up a little bit of that rush inside the pocket, if you're keeping Jimmy Garoppolo on his feet, that's a net win. And then on top of it, there were a few plays in key spots on third downs, on that fourth down, where he just has his number. So I have to touch on that first of all. Daniel Brunskill is just, for whatever reason, the kryptonite to Aaron Donald, who, in my opinion, is one of the best non-quarterbacks I've ever seen play the game of football. He is just fantastic. So I want to give him his credit. And then another guy I want to give credit to is Tom Compton. I thought Tom Compton played a really good second half. He took over for Jalen Moore, and the first series and a half or so that he was on the field, I thought that he was awful. And I even tweeted out during the game sitting next to Brad, I'm like, Tom Compton might be the worst tackle in the entire NFL. Like, he's just not good. And I thought that he cleaned up very well in the second half. I thought that he, you know, we didn't hear his name called too often in the second half, and I think that that's big. Again, it was rough to start. I think that he has issues playing tackle. Maybe he's better suited playing guard. I stand by the fact that I just don't think he's very good, which is why he's in a depth role and he's not starting. But I do think he deserves his credit there. And then as for the rest of the offensive line, they've been so good all season, and I think that it's easy to ignore solid O-line play when you can focus on them turning the ball over a bunch and losing games and losing to Colt McCoy, or, losing to the Colts in a rainstorm. Like, there's so many things that can take away the focus of a good O-line. And even when teams are winning, rarely do we hear people go, man, this O-line is just mauling them. Like, you'll hear that from, like the Brian Baldingers and the guys who are
And
really
me, basically.
yeah, and Brad, like the grinders that are really about, but it's not a glamorous position, but this unit all year has been so good. And they've been a pretty good run blocking unit for the last couple seasons. But the way that they've excelled in pass protection is extremely impressive. And I think a lot of that has to do with the addition of Alex Mack. Even if Alex Mack isn't, dominating every rep that he has, there's so many plays where you can see, again, it's not his physical ability that he's beating guys with, it's his mental acumen and the fact that he's been in the league for 10 years and he's been around. And, I'm sure going to Cal didn't hurt either. I'll throw that in there too. But they're playing with much more confidence. And I think when you have a guy who can anchor the center the way that Alex Mack has, it makes everybody around you better. I think Laken Tomlinson's quietly been one of the better players on the team this year. He's had a couple penalties here and there. He's gotten beat, a handful of times, but we rarely have heard his name, which, again, playing offensive line, the less you hear your name, the better you're probably playing. And then to close it out, Trent Williams is maybe the best offensive lineman that I've ever seen wear a 49ers uniform. We had Larry Allen for a year, but it was kind of the end of his career. Joe Staley was fantastic, but I am at the point now where, as much as I love Joe Staley and I think that he is an exceptional human being, as much as he is, I think he was a Hall of Fame talent at left tackle. Trent Williams is just, he might be like if you remove quarterbacks, Trent Williams might be like the best player in football. And, I say that because quarterbacks just carry so much value that it's hard to say, I'd take Trent Williams over a Pat Mahomes or, or Aaron Rodgers or one of these guys, Lamar Jackson. But he's that good this year. And I know people don't like PFF grades. I'm not a huge fan of them either. But when they support narratives like they will right now, like, he's having their best graded season like ever, which means that even to the like subjective PFF people, like, Trent Williams is having like a fantastic year. So it's not just that he's playing really well, it's that he's playing at a level that I have never seen a 49ers lineman play at in 20 plus years watching this team play football. So that's been a complete joy to watch. And again, I think it carries over. One other thing I would add is it would get very easy to just run behind Trent Williams almost every time you're calling run plays because he's that good. And the fact that they still feel comfortable running that toss sift back to the right side, running behind Tom Compton and Jalen Moore and these guys that were filling in for Mike McGlinchey on the right side behind Brunskill, like, they're executing as a unit and they're not overly reliant on this one player who's playing at a Hall of Fame level right now.
Watching the offensive line, man, has been such a treat. I've been having so much fun, and you again speak about it so eloquently, and you hit it every single point on the head. Just obviously with Trent Williams here in front of us, he's doing things that we don't see as an offensive line guy who's been through it and been in the trenches. The offensive linemen aren't using left-handed clubs on when they're the backside tackle on run plays away from them. This is a trend that we've been able to identify. When they run away from Trent and he's the backside tackle, you're going to see this left-handed club. And the reason why he just is so dominant is look at 94. 94 has no shot. The club comes down, loses leverage, and just tosses him on the ground. It's absolutely next level. The combination of everyone working together. Obviously, they're doing this whole scheme I believe this is the Zorro concept where they are essentially having they're trying to really hit the edges with this kind of double to backer concept. Um, obviously, if and it's going to take some time for them to pick it up because obviously you're having wide receivers try to execute blocking concepts that they're not familiar with, but that will come. But the offensive line as an overall whole, everyone, Trent, Lakin, Mack, Brunskill, Jalen Moore in spots. Mike McGlinchey was having his best year before going down. They're playing really good up front. And what's really cool about this and watching everything is I think the rest of the team is finally catching up to the offensive line, where I think a lot of people have come after the offensive line and had concerns or questions. But in reality, they've been one of the most solid units on this entire team for for the whole year. Yes, they're going to lose a rep here or there. That is the function of playing offensive line. I can show you two clips from this game where Trent Williams lost, technically, but that's how it is. You're not going to win every rep, just like your cornerback. You're not going to shut down every wide receiver. It comes with the territory. So what's really cool about it is seeing everything come together. Offensive line, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, fullbacks, everything working together. It's really a lot of fun to watch. It really, really is. Jamal Armstrong says, "Love the show. Appreciate the contribution." Jamal says, "Appreciate the insight from both of you gentlemen. Efficient Jimmy, good consistent run game, and Kyle being in his bag can lead to further wins. I like Jimmy throwing 25 times or less. I like that too. I just want them to run. But you know me. I've been saying that for weeks. That's just how offensive linemen are wired. We want to run the ball, and then we believe if you run the ball, everything else falls into play. So I agree with that. Anything you wanted to? Do you want to touch on Jamal's comment real quick, Jordan?
Yeah, honestly, the less Jimmy Garoppolo throws the ball, the better I'm feeling because that generally means two things. It means they're running the ball really well. And it means they're probably winning. So I completely agree. Um, I think it's so funny too because I don't want to take away. I'm giving Jimmy Garoppolo credit. I thought he played very well. He made some big time throws in big spots, but it felt like in that second half too. There was a couple times where he tested Jalen Ramsey specifically, and he was throwing some balls that hung in the air a little bit. They were a little airmail. They were a little out there, and I'm like, oh, but like there it is. It comes up every game. It happens, no matter how good he plays. It's like he can't help himself. He will like eventually end up throwing a ball that's in a bad spot that can get tipped, picked, whatever.
Yeah,
So
I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, and again, I'm not trying to sit here and be like one of those people that like refuses to give Jimmy Garoppolo credit. He deserves a lot of credit for how he played, but I just think it's how he's wired. I've seen it for 4.5 years now. At some point in a game, he's going to make one of those throws, and the less times he is throwing, the less likely you are to have one of those plays happen. And I also think too, like Kyle Shanahan isn't lying when he says that he wants to run the ball 40 times a game. Like that sounds like coach speak, and it sounds like this cliche thing you hear coaches say, and they've been saying, you throw to score and you run to win and all these other, stuff like that, which I think is a really dumb point too. I've heard the Chargers offensive coordinator say that, implying like scoring points doesn't help you win games, but that's a whole nother topic. But I do think that their ability to run the football like that really opens up what they're going to be able to do going forward. And I think it's really easy for us to sit here and go, like Brad and I spent hours a week watching film, studying their playbook, understanding, trying to like the concepts they're trying to run and understanding, like what they're trying to do. And we don't have a full grasp on it, but I can see for somebody who's just watching the game once on a broadcast angle, how they're like, oh, this is so boring. They're just running the ball 30 times. Like, but when you see the variations and how creative that this running scheme really is, and the mad scientist that is Mike McDaniel, who's the 49ers offensive coordinator now, who Kyle Shanahan has credited with so much of what their success was in 2019 was his run schemes that he drew up. I'm really excited. And I know it's a ways out. We don't have to deal with it, or not say deal with it. It would imply it's bad. We don't have to we won't see it soon because I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is ceding that starting job anytime soon. But when you start thinking about how creative they're going to be able to get with Trey Lance and his ability as a runner too, I get very excited thinking about it. So I totally agree. If they could run the ball 35 times a game, like Baltimore has been doing that for 3 years, and Lamar Jackson's a fantastic quarterback. I hate that narrative that he's like a running back and he struggles running. He's a fantastic quarterback, but they know when they're able to control the clock, control the football, and they run the ball 35 times a game, 40 times a game. They've been one of the best teams in the league the last couple of seasons because that's how you wear teams down. That's Brad can tell you over the course of a game, that pushback you're getting from a D line is a lot weaker in the fourth quarter than it is in the first when you've been demoralizing them all game for these chunk plays. 4 here, 5 there, 6 there. Like that adds up over the course of 60 minutes. So I'm really happy to see the 49ers get back to that. And then also too, it makes Jimmy more efficient. If he's throwing, he was like 19 of 20, did he throw 25 times or was he 9? I forget how many times he threw, but I knew that he was extremely efficient with what he had. I apologize for not knowing the numbers off the top
He
of my
went
head.
15 for 19,
15 for
182
19.
yards, and
Yeah,
2 touchdowns.
that's perfect. And his QBR was like 95.9 or something like that on a scale of 0 to 100. And that to me, I don't care about touchdown numbers or yardage numbers. I love QBR. I think it quantifies a lot of things that those numbers leave out and adds context to that. So if he's coming out, if he throws the ball, like he threw the ball 8 times in the NFC Championship game and they just steamrolled the Packers. Like if they could play like that every week, I would have no problem. If they went out and they didn't throw the ball once in a single game and they won, I don't care. So yeah, I'm totally with Jamal there. Like I hope they keep doing it, and it doesn't take anything away from Jimmy Garoppolo. If they're winning games, and it shouldn't be like, oh, the running game's carrying them, or they're doing this or doing that, because he's ultimately converting these third downs, and he's playing well enough to not only keep them in games, but put them in a position to win. So again, it just comes back to they've been playing with a synchronicity that we haven't seen all season.
Absolutely, and hopefully they continue to build. Obviously, the Jags are coming up. They are going to Florida. A bit of a trap game as the settings of trap games work. So again, what team are we going to see? We'll find out. We'll get into that into a little bit. Robert Slavin says, "Love the show, man. Jags are no joke. They play well." Agreed. We appreciate the contributions and we appreciate everyone in the chat who's contributing to the conversation. You guys always really make this a lot of fun. Let's see. We talked about, I think, most of the things that we wanted to talk about on offense, unless there's anything else you wanted to touch on before. I want to talk about defense.
Yeah, there was just one thing real quick because I know that there could be. It's weird because I think that ESPN could have chosen a better acronym because it makes it very confusing. So I wanted to answer Debbie's question I saw in the chat. There's quarterback rating, which is on a scale of 0 to 158.3. And then there's QBR, which is 0 to 100. And it's, again, if you hear QBR, like I would assume that the acronym is quarterback rating. So I think ESPN could have done a better job when they, invented this stat and tracking this kind of data. But QBR is 0 to 100. So when you're at 96.5 on a scale of 0 to 100, that's extremely impressive. Generally, the more elite quarterbacks in the league hover around the like low to mid 80s. So 96.5 is phenomenal. That's where you really want to be. His quarterback rating, I imagine, was definitely north of 100. I don't.
He was 141.7, so it was really high.
Yeah. So that makes total sense. And again, I can see how it's totally confusing. But I like QBR a little bit better because QBR again accounts for drops and sacks and it accounts for errant throw. It makes a more quantified number that's a little bit more nuanced than just saying he had X amount of yards and had this many touchdowns. Because I think one of the worst games Jimmy played was that week 1 game against Arizona last year. And he had like 65% completion percentage, like 250, 2 touchdowns, no picks. And if you look at that, you're like, hey, he didn't play bad. It doesn't tell the whole story. That's why I really like that QBR number because it's usually far more in line with what you see with your own eyes.
Great explanation. Before we go over to the defense, everyone, if you guys are enjoying our guy Jordan spitting mad bars, please do us a favor, hit that like button, get this thing shot up. Let's get the vibes out here because the defense balled out. Specifically, the boy Jimmy Ward, 2 interceptions, 1 pick to the house. Dude's got sound bites after the game calling for Odell's head. I mean, I don't know if there is anyone whose stock is much higher on the 49ers right now than Jimmy Ward. Tell me a little bit about Jimmy Ward's performance, the impact, the momentum his plays had on the overall impact of the game. Just let me know what your thoughts are on his performance, obviously being the big score and the 2 interceptions.
Well, first of all, I think Jimmy Ward deserves a lot of credit for the amount of confidence he had before the game. I'm sure everybody who watched The Last Dance last year when it came out remembers the scene where Michael Jordan's talking about how, the sign of a good man is somebody that can talk when the score's even or when you're trailing, not when you're ahead. And Jimmy Ward not only talked before they were ahead, he talked before they even played in like July and was basically like, Matt Stafford, I don't care about Matt Stafford. He's, this is the same team we beat every single year. This is the same team, the same Matt Stafford that can't win a playoff game. People, they trashed Jared Goff. Jared Goff took them to the playoffs and took them to the Super Bowl and all that. And I was sitting there and I'm like, hey, I respect the confidence, but I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I think Matt Stafford's way better than Jared Goff. And I'll defend Jared Goff more than most people will. And the ability for him to not only say that, but then come out, get targeted the way he was by that offense, and then deliver 2 interceptions, a huge pick six, and just kind of, again, like snatch the soul out of them in the first, what was it, like 15 minutes of the game, 14 minutes of the game. Like, I just can't help but respect it. And it's so funny. Anybody who's on Twitter, if you guys know who Hawk Blogger is, the guy who covers the Seahawks, I had a conversation with him on Twitter earlier this year where we were talking about players that were top 10 positions for the Niners and Seahawks and stuff. And I said that I think Jimmy Ward's a top 10 safety. And I said I also understand why people who don't watch the Niners every week might not think that, because they're so overly reliant on interceptions and pass deflections and all that stuff. Whereas week in and week out, like, folks like Brad and I are watching what this guy does in coverage and how they throw him in the slot. They throw him over top. They have him playing man-to-man with tight ends and slot receivers. He is so skilled, and he is for so long been such a vital component of this defense, and has never really gotten the national recognition that he deserves. I know a lot of Niners fans are giving him his due, which is fantastic to see because he certainly earns it. But again, it comes back to this guy has been a top 10 safety for years now. But again, because he doesn't have these gaudy interception numbers, like he had more interceptions or the same amount of interceptions in the first quarter versus the Rams as he had in his entire career leading up to that game. He had 2 coming into the game. He had 2 in the first quarter. But only having 4 interceptions in his career doesn't take away from how good he is. And another reason why I hate using interceptions to evaluate cornerback play or defensive back play is if you're really good at what you do, good quarterbacks aren't going to throw the ball at you. They're going to have to be forced to put the ball elsewhere. And I think that's who Jimmy Ward's been for so long. So I can't say enough good things about him. He's a sure tackler. He's really good when they bring him down in the box. He's great against the run. He's just all around a really good football player. Again, I think he's a top 10 safety in this league, no question. And it felt so good for him on a national stage to kind of get that shine that I think he's deserved for a long time. And you have to think about the fact, too, the guy was drafted to play cornerback by Trent Baalke. He had it's not easy to just flip-flop positions like that and move all over the place. And I think that the transition to safety ultimately was beneficial. And again, I know people always come back to, well, they don't create turnovers, they don't do this, they don't do that. When Jimmy Ward is on the field, teams have a lot tougher time making big plays against this 49ers defense. As we saw when he was out versus Arizona, they weren't tackling in the open field the same way. They're able to take shot plays over the safeties, over the top. So yeah, his presence there is just I can't say enough good things about Jimmy Ward.
Yeah, and we missed him. And again, another reason to raise and sing his praises is because when Jimmy Ward wasn't in and it was Tavon Wilson and it was whoever, when both Tart and Jimmy were out, you saw like how much they missed him. And you saw like how much the defense changed when those two aren't in. Jimmy does so much on the back end, whether it's just being the last line of defense, like you've mentioned, clamping, tight ends, slot wide receiver, whatever. He can do it all. He's not afraid to hit anyone. He's going to come up and punch you in the mouth. Jimmy Ward has been phenomenal these last couple years, and we know Jimmy Ward's story. Jimmy Ward at one point probably was one of the most hated players on the 49ers, just simply for the fact that he was drafted by Trent Baalke and he was hurt amidst an era where everyone was hurt and no one was playing well and everyone hated Trent Baalke. So at least for me, if Trent Baalke drafted you, I probably didn't like you for the most part, because I just didn't like who he was going after, didn't like the philosophies. But you've seen the maturation. You've seen Jimmy Ward grow into a role, which is the safety role, and just really flourish. And it's really awesome to see the swing. Now the fan base is riding with Jimmy like they never have before. And hopefully that will transition to more good juice, more good energy for this defense. Another player that continues to step up. I know, and just like any player, I don't want to like focus too much on the negatives. Players are going to get burnt. They're going to miss tackles. It just happens. It's the nature of the business. Aziz Al-Shaair was flying around on defense, led the team in tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Um, what are your thoughts on Aziz Al-Shaair up until this point?
He's been so good. And I think the thing with Aziz Al-Shaair that's so funny is he had one bad game, I thought, that was objectively really bad, where he played against the Cardinals. He over pursued a little bit. He missed some tackles. He obviously missed that tackle on James Conner on 3rd and 18. And it's so funny that, to me, that people think that that just means that he like hasn't been good all season. And again, I'm watching this game film over and over all year. He has been one of the best players on that defense. Not just serviceable, not just okay, he filled in for Drake Greenlaw and was his performance was admirable. No, he's been dominating all season. And Kyle Posey, who's my editor at Niners Nation, tremendously smart individual, summed it up in a way that I think is much better than I could. He basically said that Aziz Al-Shaair plays with a mentality that can't be coached. That's something that you just kind of need to naturally possess. And that's no disrespect to Dre Greenlaw or any of the other linebackers. It's what they needed. He had that play where he came up and made a tackle in the gap, and his face mask was like falling off of his helmet because he hit the ball carrier so hard. And I think having that kind of aggressiveness and mentality really just is something that this defense had been, I don't want to say lacking, but it's something that they really needed. And I have said all week, I think that he should maintain that starting spot at the will linebacker and be out there on, sub package downs with Fred Warner. I want to make this about lifting up Aziz Al-Shaair and not make it seem like I'm bringing down Dre Greenlaw. But I think Dre Greenlaw gets so much equity because of a tackle he made 2 years ago in Seattle. And Dre Greenlaw has been a fine, player. He's not been like some terrible liability. But it's so funny. Like I'm on Twitter. I try to interact with as many people as I can when I post stuff. And I posted something about how I think that Al-Shaair should keep that spot over Greenlaw. And the amount of people that are like, oh, Greenlaw's way better, man. He made that stop in Seattle in 2019. Like, believe it or not, Kyle Shanahan and DeMeco Ryans aren't choosing what's best for their defense in week 11 of 2021 based on one tackle that Dre Greenlaw made 2 years ago. And I was thinking about it. If Aziz Al-Shaair had a cool nickname like Big Play Dre, like Dre Greenlaw has, and he's made some big plays that he should deserve that. He had a big tackle on Sunday night against the Rams last year when they had that goal line stand. He had the interception of Russell Wilson on Monday Night Football. He had the tackle, obviously, in Seattle. He's made big plays. I'm not trying to take away from him. But if Aziz Al-Shaair had some cool nickname, I feel like the common fan would be far more supportive of him because the takes that I'm seeing, and again, I'm happy to hear anybody else's opinion. I'm not going to just sit here and be like, I'm right, you're wrong, you don't know what you're talking about. But I'm sitting here and I'm like, what are people watching where they think that Al-Shaair is just like not good in coverage or he's not good against the run and Greenlaw is like so much better? I fully believe that Aziz Al-Shaair has played better than Drake Greenlaw. And the 49ers are now in a very advantageous position where they actually have to sit there and say, should we just give Drake Greenlaw, who's been a good player, his job back? Or do we ride the hot hand with the guy who's been playing really well? And it gives them more flexibility and more options. But I just had to kind of touch on that because I think it's so unfair to Aziz Al-Shaair that people are just like, oh, well, he's no big play Drake Greenlaw. Like he's been making big plays all season. Another thing I would add is Aziz Al-Shaair has 14 tackles for loss this season. So that means 14 times he's brought down an opposing ball carrier behind the line of scrimmage this season. Drake Greenlaw has 15 in his entire career, and this is his 3rd year in the NFL. So Aziz Al-Shaair has played at a level that I believe is objectively higher, and I just think that he deserves so much more respect for, the prowess that he showed and his ability to step in. One other thing I'll add real quick. I wrote something quick this morning that got published on Niners Nation about how I think the Niners have done a really good job developing undrafted free agents because Aziz is an undrafted free agent. Kevin Givens, who's made big plays on the D-line, is an undrafted free agent. Emmanuel Mosley, one of their starting corners, is an undrafted free agent. Jermichael Hasty, who's had some big games for them, undrafted free agent. Obviously, he's no longer
Jeff
here.
Wilson.
Jeff Wilson, Kendrick Bourne went from being a
Daniel Brunskill.
Daniel Brunskill. So if you go down the list of players that they've added and developed on this team, like they've done a really good job. And I know it doesn't take away from the fact they've missed earlier in rounds, but I think it does speak to the ability they have to develop guys in-house. And that's something I see a lot that, the 49ers can't develop players. They're bad at developing players. they've done a pretty good job developing guys that teams didn't want to touch with the first 250 picks in a draft and turn them into not only viable starters, but impact contributors. So I just think that Azeez Al-Shaair is the latest and greatest of that list of players that has done a really good job coming in as an unheralded, undrafted guy, contributed on special teams, because Al-Shaair's been making plays on special teams for years. And that's one thing that I think really the 49ers should stick with, is making these guys earn their spots on defense and on offense by contributing through special teams. So maybe we'll start to see Ambry Thomas and Demo Lenore and some of these rookies, and Hufanga, even if he's maintaining some kind of starting role on offense, contributing more on special teams, because I think that the Niners had a really good system having those guys earn their stripes kind of through that special teams play and then turning them into regular contributors.
I could honestly listen to you talk about Azeez Al-Shaair for probably another 30 minutes. Absolutely. Can't disagree with anything that you said. I think one of the things that you touched on, I think that was in reference to kind of what KP was saying, was about his mentality, the way he plays the game. If you want some insight into that after our show, hell, if you want to go right now, go Google Azeez Al-Shaair, go look into his story. It's remarkable. He was homeless at one point. Really, really has come from humble beginnings. So I have a ton of respect for Azeez Al-Shaair as a human being, let alone just being a football player for the San Francisco 49ers. So if you do want to get a little bit more insight into that mentality of why he probably plays with his hair on fire, play in and play out, because he knows what it's like to not know where the next meal is coming from. He knows what it's like to not have shelter. His story is remarkable, and I think that comes out in his play, at least the way I watch him and I watch him play. It's really awesome to see, and I'm so happy for Azeez in a contract year. Starting out as an undrafted free agent, he's really blossoming into his own. He is going to earn the bag. He is going to get paid. And again, based on where he's come from, the most humble of beginnings, I'm so excited for the guy just as a human being, as a person. And I think he is a great person. Everything I've heard about him behind the scenes, he's just one of the most legitimate human beings out there. So super happy for the success that Azeez Al-Shaair is having. Again, Jordan hit on all the points perfectly. And again, I too agree. Dre Greenlaw has been phenomenal in spots. He's big play Dre. He's done a lot for this team and has had big moments. But I really believe Azeez Al-Shaair has put together a more complete body of work this season than I've seen from Dre Greenlaw in years past. Now, it doesn't mean Dre Greenlaw can't be effective and can't be someone who plays. He will play, but I do think that it should be Fred Warner, Azeez Al-Shaair, until the time says otherwise. So we also have been dealing with Fred Warner. Fred Warner came out and said that he's not. He admitted that he's not playing to the level that he expects himself to play. And what did you see from Fred Warner against the Rams? And do you see him kind of taking the steps in the right direction?
So this is my whole thing on Fred Warner, and I said earlier this season, I was like, man, he's really not playing at the level he played at last year. But I think that the added nuance that's required there is that he set the bar so high last year and played at such a high level that the range of outcome, almost every outcome that would have happened this season would result in him regressing a little bit. Because again, when you play at a level that high, it's incredibly difficult to sustain it. And him even slightly regressing, as I think he has this year, still has him playing better than the majority of linebackers in the NFL. And I think the thing is with Fred Warner is that he is so perfect for the modern NFL, and his ability to pick up the number 3 in the passing game and guard tight ends and guard slot receivers and play that deep third in Tampa 2 and be able to just like it's incredible. He plays the run like a linebacker, he can play the pass like a safety, and he can run with almost anybody. And I just think that ability is something that's you don't let that get out of the building. And that's why the 49ers signed him to that lucrative extension. He deserved every penny. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that there are takes out there I'm seeing where people are like, oh, he got paid, he doesn't care anymore. I think it's extremely disrespectful to Fred. Everything you'll ever hear about the guy is that he's all about his work ethic. And I think that this notion that he got paid and stopped trying or working as hard is just, again, it's insulting to him, and it couldn't be farther from the truth. So again, I think it just comes back to he is at times maybe trying to do too much. Maybe he's trying to make plays when he should just, um, rely more on instinct. I think he said something about overthinking things a little bit, and he's cognitive of his, uh, again, slight regression that's happened this year. But the point that I have to make is that while he hasn't been playing at the level he played at last year, that level he's playing at this year is still extremely high. And it's just, again, like that 2020 Fred Warner was one of the best linebacker seasons I've ever seen. Like the ability, again, to pick up the number three option in the passing game and the ability to fly all over the field like that. I think it's just been there's been a couple games this year where he's missed tackles we've got accustomed to him making. He had the bad luck where he almost had that fumble against Arizona. He almost didn't pick up. So it's been a couple plays that again get highlighted, and I can understand how. Again, people watching the broadcast angle once and seeing things like that are like, "Oh man, Fred Warner's not good." But there's so many plays that we have the privilege of seeing by having the all 22 and watching coaches film that are off the screen where you see him completely taking a tight end or a receiver out of a play. And he had, I forget if it was Higbee, somebody in the end zone. He made a play in that Rams game that prevented a touchdown when he was in coverage. Like he just has a skill set that you can't ignore. And I would take Fred Warner playing at this level where he might not be as good as last year over probably every linebacker in the league other than maybe two or three. So I'm not worried about Fred at all.
Absolutely, I'm not worried either. I think one of the other things, obviously, is how your teammates can affect your play. The 49ers are dealing with a bit of a band-aid type situation when it comes to interior defensive linemen. Now we have DJ Jones and we have guys like Kentavious Street, but we don't have Javon Kinlaw. We don't have that massive space eater. Again, we talk about running concepts from the offensive lineman perspective. You're trying to get to the linebacker, but it is so much harder to get to a linebacker when you have a dominant defensive tackle just plopped right there in the A gap or the B gap, and you have to be able to double, make sure that that defensive tackle is taken care of before your guards can split and dip off and get to the linebackers. We're not really having that. We don't have that right now. We don't really have that stout interior defensive uh, defender that is keeping Fred clean or Aziz clean. So these guys are actually having to fight through a little bit more muddiness than they typically have in the past. So that is also going to contribute to some issues and maybe some perceived struggles. But I do agree that I think Fred Warner. He's referenced a lot of his mentality and kind of the thought process, and that's typical of a lot of struggles of any player that we see, whether they're why they're good or why they're bad, how they're feeling that day. Just like we all have. The episode that we're talking about is called Vibe Check. Sometimes you don't have a great vibe. Sometimes your mindset is in the right spot, your energy isn't there. And so when you go out onto that field, you perform that way. And it's not you just like, what's the reason? I'm still the same person. I'm the same guy, but I'm not playing to the level that I expect to. A lot of it comes back to just how you're feeling and the mentality, which is what Fred Warner talked about. It's what Daniel Brunskill talked about when I talked to him. He mentions like, the fact that he knows he's going against Aaron Donald for an entire week, it just gets him to mentally lock in much more than any other player he ever goes against. And what he talked about was like, how do I do that every week? How do I play and prepare my mentality every week like I'm going against Aaron Donald? Because if you could do that, you have the skill set to be able to accomplish and win. It's just how do you do it consistently? And that always comes back to the mindset. So Fred Warner's got a lot on his plate. He got paid. He's probably pressing a little bit too much. And once he kind of settles down, hopefully everything falls back into place. Um, let's talk about Talanoa Hufanga. Uh, Kyle Shanahan, pretty interesting comment. I haven't heard him speak like this about players in regards to winning or losing starting spots. Um, he had said because Jaquiski Tart, his practice window has opened. I would imagine we're going to get a notification tomorrow that Tart has been activated from injured reserve. But Kyle Shanahan said today or this week on the podium was that even though Tart is coming back, he is not guaranteed to get the starting job back from Talanoa Hufanga. Do you think Talanoa Hufanga's been playing that well? What are your thoughts on the way Talanoa's been playing? Um, what are your thoughts on that?
I would start it off by just saying I don't think that he should be starting over Jaquiski Tart. I would rather have Tart starting. I just trust him far more on the back end. I think the chemistry he has with Jimmy Ward, as much as we were just talking about how Jimmy Ward is an unsung hero, I think that Jaquiski Tart has been even more so. If you look at the splits when he does play and when he doesn't play over the last few years, the defense tremendously misses him when he's not there. So I think Hufanga has played well for a rookie. Again, he's not a guy who has great measurables. If you look at his, speed and three cone and 40 time and all that stuff, but he plays with great instinct, and we've talked about that in the past. That third down play, I believe it was Darrell Henderson, the running back. He ended up breaking up a pass intended for him, and he timed it perfectly because if he gets there a second sooner, it's pass interference. If he gets there a second later, it's a completed pass, likely for a first down. And his ability to get there and blow up that play just is it kind of embodies the instincts that he plays with. But I do think that there are still some growing pains. There's some stuff that I've seen on tape where he appeared to be a little bit out of position, which again comes with being a rookie in the league. This is how you learn. So I would feel more confident with Tart going forward. If he's healthy, I would put him out there, and I hope Kyle does. But I, don't blame them or fault them for the excitement they've had around Hufanga with the instinct that he plays with and his ability to come down in the box and lay hits. And, while he's not, this is my biggest thing is you can have the best measurables, you can have the best 40 time and all that stuff. But if you're taking worse angles to a ball carrier, if you're not in the right spot, none of that stuff matters. And I think that Hufanga's ability to be in the right spot more than makes up for whatever he may lack physically. And again, he's not any slouch when it comes to physicality, but there's a reason why he was a fifth round pick and not a first or second round pick. So it's not something that I'm going to lose sleep over, but I do have to say, I stand strongly by the fact that I think Tart still deserves to be the starter in that starting spot. And I hope that they allow him to earn that spot back and place him there just because, again, I have so much more confidence with him and Ward on the back end than I would Ward and Hufanga at this point in time.
Absolutely. And to keep the conversation going on Hufanga, I think Jimmy Ward came out this week and talked about how just again, you touched on it, how intellectually smart he is. He's a football guy to his core. Things just make sense to him. It comes easy. He sees it before it happens. He's able to connect the dots. One of the things that Jimmy Ward talked about is how smart he is and how he communicates constantly back there, and he's even said Talanoa's corrected him in certain instances. So I think that is a big part of why they like Kufanga so much. Again, I think what did Jamal say? I thought this was funny. Jamal said, "If I hear from one more fan of how Hufanga is like Palomalu because they're both Polynesian, bro, I'm gonna lose it. Palomalu and Huff are totally different players, um, athletically." I agree 100%. I've been saying this since the draft season. Now I get it. They worked out together. They're both Polynesian. They both got the long curly hair. They're both island boys. They got the vibes, all that, but they're different players. They have different traits. They have different skill sets. Um, I think one of the similarities that you might liken to both is that they're both very cerebral. They're very smart and they put themselves in a position to make plays. However, on the flip side, I do agree too that I think, at least personally, I thought Jaquiski Tart was actually having a pretty good year this year. I thought he was playing well. I thought he was all over the place. I thought he was doing a really good job. Obviously, the injuries hurt, and probably part of what we're looking at is a bit of a succession plan and a development plan. That if they kind of see, yeah, maybe in their minds they see Tart and Hufanga kind of equal, maybe they're just opting for the rookie to get more development. I don't know. Um, I'm not displeased with either one of their plays, but again, it's just another interesting conversation because Kyle Shanahan didn't say that about Greenlaw and Aziz. He didn't say that about other positions. So it was just something interesting. We'll obviously see how it plays out, but at the end of the day, if Jimmy Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, and Jaquiski Tart are healthy, that's good news for the 49ers because all three will play. It'll just be dependent on how they're rolled out and what situations occur. Let's talk about the defensive line, Jordan. What are your thoughts on the D line up until this point? You had Nick Bosa get a sack, tackle for a loss. He's getting held like at an unbelievable clip, it feels like. What are your thoughts on them? We also got an Arden Key sack. What are your thoughts on the D line?
Um, I think that the Arden Kisak was probably my favorite of the game because they had him lined up over the left guard and they had him inside. Arden Key's a defensive end. He's generally playing outside the tackle. And I think that their ability to interchange guys and play guys in the interior, like Givens and Street, like that was the big thing I saw from Contavious Street during the preseason was the ability to go inside, outside. And the fact that they're doing that with Arden Key now, there's been some snaps I've seen Nick Bosa standing up inside over a guard. So they're getting much more creative with that. The Nick Bosa holding stuff is interesting because I know 49ers fans get really frustrated about it. But I do think if we're going by like the textbook, like ruling of holding, a lot of stuff that appears like holding to us really isn't by definition of the rule. And I'm sure you know as an offensive lineman, there's stuff that you probably have done where people are like, oh, it's a hold. And you're like, no, this is well within my rights as an offensive lineman to do it. So I think
There
that
just to interject really quickly, there is holding on every single play. They just don't want your hands outside or the kind of chokehold situation that we keep seeing.
and I do think, Rich had a really good point. I was talking to him about it, and he said something about how Bosa's own dominance might be the reason why he's not getting these holding calls because he's winning these reps despite being held. So in these plays where there's questionable holding occurring, what these refs are looking for are you really being impeded in your rush? And in real time, when you see Bosa just fighting through an offensive lineman, it's much easier to miss because I don't think he's still attempting to get the quarterback. He's not attempting to sell the hold, which I support because a lot of times I don't think they're going to call it. I think holding penalties are bad for the product that the NFL wants to put out, which is higher scoring, which is more electric passing offense, all that stuff. So it just kind of is what it is. But I do think there are a lot of plays that I see on Twitter where people are like, they'll take like a screenshot out of context and be like, oh my God, Nick Bosa is getting held. And you go back and watch the film of that specific play. And it's not holding at all. It's a perfectly fine play. So I'm not too worried about it. It just kind of is what it is. I think, again, this comes back to they're really missing D Ford and the impact that he has because when you're able to collapse a pocket from both sides the way they were able to, and Bosa and Ford were both healthy and on the field, it just opens things up so much. I thought Armstead had a really good game too. He had a really hot start to the year. I thought he kind of leveled off for a bit, but he's back the last couple of games. He's played really well. I think he's more than played up to his contract. People cite like QB hits and like sacks and just like will throw out numbers that will fit their narrative that he isn't very good. But anybody watching will tell you that he's been, pretty solid. And not just pretty solid. He's been like very good. He's been one of the better interior pass rushers in the NFL this season. And again, he has the versatility to line up on the outside, line up on the inside. They've been playing him more on the inside with the absence of Javon Kinlaw. So I think they still have a strong unit. I just think that as long as D Ford's out and they don't have that like speed rusher they can throw in the 9 technique that's really just going to blow by guys on the line of scrimmage, it really affects how effective and caps kind of the potential of that D line because everything's built around having that, pass rushing force opposite Nick Bosa. And I just think they don't have that now. And that's no disrespect to any of the guys that have. I think Jordan Willis is really good. I always mess up the pronunciation of his name, but the defensive end they got from the Texans, I don't want to be, butcher it. My apologies.
Charles Omenihu.
Yeah, Omenihu. Yeah. So I thought that he had a couple reps that looked pretty good. So, they have guys that they can kind of get by with, but it's just not going to be the same as when a healthy D Ford is out there, as we saw during training camp and we saw kind of in the first week or so of the season. He makes a huge difference. The unfortunate thing is he's been hurt and he can't stay on the field. So it really does just, again, come back to limiting the potential of what the defensive line can do. But I think that the unit has been sufficient enough, and they've, the biggest difference this year is D'Amico Ryans has shown far more of a willingness to, I think, bring pressure than we saw during the majority of Robert Saleh's time, particularly post 2019. Saleh was kind of getting by on just rushing 4 and saying, hey, I have 4 really good defensive linemen. I'm going to drop 7 in coverage and dare you to beat me. And that worked for a lot of the season. But I think this year you've seen they're blitzing out of the nickel corner spot a little bit more. They're blitzing safeties a little bit more frequently. They're bringing pressure with linebackers a little bit more. So I do think that that's helped the D line a little bit. But the unit as a whole, I think, they aren't as dominant as I maybe expected them to be. But again, I think it's all about tempering expectations, coming back to knowing that they don't have that secondary speed rusher opposite Nick Bosa. And it's really hard to replicate what D Ford brings to that team.
Man, something tells me that Azeez Ojulari in the second round would be doing wonders right now for the 49ers. I tell you, I don't want to go up. Draft season is around the corner. Jordan and I, we're going to be your number one source. We're telling you now. But for the reasons why is exactly what he's talking about. We knew that if the 49ers were going to get anything out of D Ford this offseason, it was house money, but we weren't putting any eggs into that basket. We kind of imagined the 49ers would move throughout the draft. At least I did through the draft process with that same mindset that you can't necessarily count on D Ford because you haven't been able to for the last couple of years. So why not use draft capital again? Jordan put me on to Azeez Al-Jalari, defensive end for the New York Giants. Does he still have more sacks than Nick Bosa? He did at one point
I don't think he
this
does
year.
anymore, but he's been tremendous this year. And he had natural bend. He had that speed around the corner. I understand there were some health concerns, whatever, and that's why he wasn't a first. He would have been a first round pick if he had all the medical boxes checked off before the draft. But again, he just fits so much of what they appeared to want to do. Another guy that I really like that we talked about a bunch is Trayvon Marrig from TCU, who's been the Raiders starting safety all year. Another really rangy guy who looks like he's going to have a future. So, I'm not saying that I know better than 49ers. I think that's reckless and irresponsible of me because I'm not held to, I can whiff on a player and nothing matters. I'm just saying, should they ever want my advice, I'm just a phone call away. I'm just a DM away. There's a lot of guys that I was very high on that are playing very well while the 49ers are struggling to get their draft picks on the field. So, John, Kyle, Adam Peters, Parag, whoever may be out there, I'm just saying, I'm a simple guy, give me a call sometime. We'll work something out. But
Call GM Jordan. Call GM Jordan immediately because he's on it. And he was on Azeez Ojulari. I would say it's about January when I think you put me on. It was actually spawned off a conversation about Eric Armstead, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but yeah, Jordan was on it 100%. He said, "Hey, Brad, look at this guy. I hadn't seen him up until that point. I looked at him and I freaked out. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this dude's the smaller version of Brian Burns. Like I'm in heaven." Um, Obviously, what we are kind of alluding on and kind of going down on a tangent a little bit, but kind of trying to bring it back is that the 49ers just haven't had that opposite edge rusher across from Nick Bosa that they need. And then you see the hits that they took across the defensive line. It's Nick Bosa out there right now. It's Nick Bosa and a bunch of guys. It's not how they had envisioned it in camp. It's not how they had tried to build it with Javon Kinlaw anchoring down the center, with Eric Armstead being this chess piece that you could move inside, outside, do all these different kinds of things with. Now they're having to, be less creative because they just don't have the options available. Um, Obviously, hindsight being what it is, Azeez Ojulari would have been a fantastic addition, but I digress. Um, before we wrap up on kind of the Rams and the 49ers game, if you guys do have any questions for Jordan and I, especially Jordan, drop them in the chat and we'll start to kind of gear this towards any of your guys' feedback or topics that you want to discuss or want Jordan or I's opinions on. Start dropping those in the chat. But as you guys are doing that, and as you're liking the video, of course, what do the 49ers need to do? I would say from like a global perspective, really far out kind of view of how they need to prepare and go into Jacksonville to stack another win.
honestly, they just need to show up and stay out of their own way. I do worry again, short week, coming off an emotional win. 10 a.m. starts on the East Coast generally don't bode well for West Coast teams. So I wouldn't be surprised for it to be closer than it would be, say, on a normal week of rest if the game was played in Santa Clara. So I'm not expecting it to be, this blowout where they're beating the brakes off of them. But the 49ers are the much more talented team. And I think that this comes back to my belief that, you can really tell, good teams win games, they find ways to do it. Great teams handle business against bad teams. And I think that this is where the 49ers need to really define themselves as being, maybe they're not like a great elite top 3 team in the league where they deserve to be in the Super Bowl conversation, but they're talented enough that they should be handling business against teams like the Jaguars. So they can go in, control the clock by running the ball again, limit turnovers. I think the offense has been pretty good this year. I think the offense will be able to put up points. Um, Trevor Lawrence has a little bit of sneaky mobility to him. We know how much 49ers fans get uneasy when mobile quarterbacks play the 49ers. But I do have faith that they'll be able to keep that Jacksonville offense in check. So, again, this kind of comes back to the only way I really see them losing this game is if they come out flat due to that cross country flight, and if they end up kind of playing like they did against Arizona, where they just have these huge, costly turnovers when they're moving the ball well. They have these back-breaking penalties on third downs when they should be getting off the field, and they're gifting a new set of downs to their opponent. Like, if they can get that out of the way, there's nothing that I'm seeing from Jacksonville where I'm like, hey, you know what? Like, this team's going to, give the 49ers problems. And I know that they gave the Bills issues, and the Bills are, a Super Bowl contender. They're one of the better teams in the league. But the big difference between the Bills and the 49ers is that the Bills, for the last couple seasons, I've been saying it, they don't run the football. Like, they will a little bit. They have Zach Moss, they have Singletary, Josh Allen's mobile, but they throw the ball. It's incredible. They run so much play action, but they rarely run the football. And I think that tends to cost them. And it's really funny. I have a good friend of mine, John Banks, who is from Buffalo, who's a huge diehard Bills fan. And I tried to tell him that for a couple of years. I'm like, man, I like the Bills a lot. I'm rooting for you guys. I love Bills Mafia, but I think that lack of running game is ultimately going to cost you. And he messaged me like in the third quarter of that game that they ended up losing to Jacksonville and was like, man, like it took me like a year, but I'm with you. Like, I agree. Like, this is a problem. So the reason I bring that up is because I think that not being able to run the ball is what gets you in those positions. And I think the 49ers finding their identity on the ground is what will keep them from falling into a trap game, kind of like we saw with Buffalo. So again, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, they're just going to dominate this game. I think it'll be a 1-score, maybe 10-point game, something like that. Like, it won't be this game where they're up 24 points in the fourth quarter like it was against the Rams. But I would be extremely disappointed and surprised should they not come out of Jacksonville with a win in this game on Sunday.
Underrated storyline going into this game. This is the Trent Baalke revenge game. Trent Baalke's over there GMing these Jags. He's got Carlos Hyde over there. I think Bruce Miller's still over there again. Remember, he left the team for beating up an old man because he was really drunk. Unfortunate situation. But there's a lot of former 49ers and ties over there in Jacksonville. CJ Beathard's over there. George Kittle's roommate and teammate. They were teammates for like 7 years or something, going back from Iowa to the 49ers. So, hey, the Jaguars could be motivated to come out. And again, we talked about a little bit about some of the mentality aspects of the game when we were talking about the linebackers and whatever. Biggest key for me is just come out with the same mentality that they came out with against the Rams. Again, you touched on it based on Trent Williams and like what he said. Oh, they counted us out. He was taking his tape off. They're like, oh, they counted us out. Shouldn't have counted us out because, again, at the end of the day, these are alpha males. They're a bunch of dogs. And when you count out alpha males and you count out dogs, that just takes their intensity to compete to a whole nother level. So that's the hope that I see. I hope there's no complacency. I hope that obviously the season has been hard. It has not been easy. It's not like we're out of the weeds yet with the great win against the Rams on Monday Night Football. We're not out of the weeds yet. We still got to go to Jacksonville. This team has shown they have been good on the road. So hopefully they can carry and travel that mentality into this game because the 49ers need it at this point. Obviously, everyone throws around must win. It feels like every game this year has been must win. I'm not going to call this a must win, even though it kind of is. So it's just one of those situations where You just hope they got the talent. They're getting, even though Elijah Mitchell's not going to be there, okay, well, you have Jeff Wilson. I think Jeff Wilson has proven to me in limited carries that he'll be able to carry the workload just fine. Um, Jalen Moore, Tom Compton, whoever it is, they're going to be serviceable enough. So I'm not necessarily worried about glaring holes of necessarily personnel or things like that, or how we essentially match up against the Jags. Um, Jags are hit or miss at this point, so the hope is that we show that we are the veteran team. The head coach that's been here for a while, quarterback who's been here for a while, tight end, linebackers, like tackle, like we got a much stronger core group of guys, and that is the hope that we see that translates over to the Jags. Um, so I'm gonna start. You cool on time, Jordan? We probably won't go too much longer, but just want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
double
I'm good.
check. Okay, so we will start to transition to some of your questions. If you guys have questions, drop it in the chat. I'll try to go back and pick up some of the earlier ones that came through, but to get us going, do you think this is an opportunity where we get to see more Sermon if a Elijah Mitchell is out against the Jags?
Yeah, because I could be mistaken, but I'm almost positive their only healthy running backs right now are Sermon, Jeff Wilson, and Kyle Juszczyk, if you count him as a back, which we've seen Kyle's given him a decent amount of carries when there haven't been other options. So, yeah, it's opening up for that. And you can always kind of like follow the clues that they leave. And the Niners will say in the media, like if they have a player, like people always talk about like the dog houses and stuff like that. Like you'll hear them say things like, "Oh, this player had like a really good week of practice, so they did this, so they're making strides, or they're doing that." So, like for example, they said that about Ambry Thomas and Aaron Banks and Demo Lenore, how these rookies were making strides. And there were some guys who had been active all year that were healthy scratches against the Rams, and all of the rookies were up. Every single draft pick that they made was up and dressed for that game. And if I recall correctly, I believe they said something recently about Sermon making those strides and getting better and improving and stuff. So they almost kind of like tip their hand with some of this stuff, where even though they're not giving direct info that we would all, I'm sure, really like to know why these guys aren't playing, they're not telling us the reasons why, but they will kind of tip their hand in regards to if we'll see them. So if I'm not mistaken, because I apologize, I go through like hours of these press conferences every week. If I remember correctly, there was something about Trey Sermon where they did mention that he had been improving and he had been, doing things that they wanted in practice and whatnot. And I could be wrong, but there's nothing I've seen from his performance on the field where, I could see why you'd want Elijah Mitchell getting touches over him. But I haven't seen anything where I'm like, man, this guy's so bad you can't even play him and like spell Elijah Mitchell every once in a while. So he could have done something off the field. We have to remember these guys are human beings. Maybe he was late to meetings. Maybe he, missed some assignment we didn't see. Maybe he was really bad in pass protection during practice. This is all speculation. I'm not trying to, accuse him of doing anything like that. I'm just saying like there are other things that are in play for NFL players beyond just what we see in the 60 minutes they're on the field on Sundays and Mondays. So I just think that based on what we've heard from them in the media, I think that he's in a spot where he probably will get some work. I think they'll lean on Jeff Wilson early, but if they get a comfortable lead or they're running the ball a lot, it wouldn't surprise me to see him get 5 or 10 carries in this game.
Shout out To for the question. DJ's got one for Jordan. Jordan, what are your thoughts on Brandon Ayuk on special teams, and will he be a factor offensively this week?
So I think that I am of the school of thought that football really comes down to getting the ball into your best player's hands as many times as possible in a game. And I know that's not, rocket science. I'm clearly stating something that probably sounds really obvious, but that includes special teams. And I think, for a long time, like Antonio Brown was one of the best wide receivers I've ever seen. He's still playing at a pretty high level, but when he was playing at an all pro level in Pittsburgh, he was still returning punts for them. And there was a lot of times where that not only turned into touchdowns, but it turned into plus field position. And when you're able to flip the field even 10, 15 yards like that, it makes a huge difference. And I think just Brandon Ayuk, more than anybody else that's returning punts, has that upside. He's had a few issues where I think, has let balls land that he should be fair catching. He had that weird fumble against the Colts. I think it was in that game, if I remember correctly. But I just think that, again, it comes back to if you get the ball to your best players in space, and there's not going to be many more plays on a football field than a punt return where you're really getting an open field to run at, it's going to put you in a better position. And I think that this notion that, you can't have your receivers returning punts because they're going to, get hurt. I don't really buy that, because the odds of him getting hurt on like an end around or a screen pass or a slant over the middle are just as high as they are with him returning kicks. And the value that you're getting from that field position is arguably better than, a small little gain he gets on an end around or a reverse or something like that. So I hope they continue to do it. I just, I don't see the downside to it. Like, I hope they continue to do it, but I'm like struggling to think why they would stop too, if that makes sense. Like, I just think it's something that right now, and until they draft a guy strictly to be like a returner, maybe Ambry Thomas fills that role at some point. He was a really good returner at Michigan. Maybe they just don't feel comfortable with him yet. 49ers fans, more than any other fan base, probably understand how important having a good punt returner and a reliable one is, based on a game in the playoffs 10 years ago. I won't mention specifically, but I think you all know where I'm going with this. I was there. If it makes anybody feel better, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad, but having a reliable guy returning punts is so valuable. So maybe they don't feel quite ready yet with Thomas, but that was one thing when they drafted him, was I was like, he has the traits to play a lot of man. He could be a good, corner, but they might really see some value with him as a returner too, as a guy who can kind of do both. So I'll be interested to watch that. I just don't know that it happens this season.
I'm curious to know, what was the feeling like? You said you were there. I know you weren't going to try to get too specific into it, but I'm going to. Uh, what was it like watching Kyle Williams do that in person?
So let me preface this with, I was there the week before for that Saints game, and Vernon Davis caught that ball, and I was there with my dad. My dad had season
The
tickets for
best,
Kansas
one of the best games of our
ever
memory.
for our lifetime. Yeah. So he had season tickets for like 30 years, right? So I grew up going to games. I'm 26, guys. So I grew up watching the 49ers be pretty much bad for most of my life up until that point. So that was the first taste. That was the first playoff win that I saw in person. I unfortunately wasn't there for that Giants comeback with Garcia, 2003. So that was the first playoff win that I saw. So I rode out of that game feeling as happy as I've ever felt watching the sport of football. And then the next week, whatever the opposite of the elation that I felt after that Vernon Davis catch was how I felt after the cut, because he fumbled twice. The first one, it was kind of like, all right, like, things happen. They'll find a way.
It was
That
the
second
double
one,
down.
this is why it hurt so bad, was, if I remember, my memory could, be off here, but if I remember correctly, the play before they punted was a third down where Justin Smith ripped through two offensive linemen while being held and grabbed Eli Manning basically by his jersey and dragged him to the ground with one hand. And I always tell people that, don't like talking about that game or think that it should never be brought up. Now that enough time has gone by, that was one of the best football games I have ever seen. It had that, that like kind of purple cloudy sky above Candlestick, that like twilight, kind of late afternoon going into evening. It was wet, but it didn't feel like rain. It was that just kind of thick moisture that anybody who's, lived in San Francisco or been to those games at Candlestick remembers. And it was just so brutal. Like the amount of hits that Alex Smith and Eli Manning took on that day, like the 49ers defense absolutely obliterated Eli Manning during that game. And I know it sucks. Nobody wanted to see the Giants win, but going back, I have so much respect for the way that man hung in there. And I think Peyton Manning mentioned, because he was there at that game, it's his brother, he's going to support him. He said that game, more than any, he thought was the best game. Eli Manning beat Tom Brady twice in the Super Bowl, and Peyton Manning said that was his best game, because he was talking about how rare it is for a quarterback to take the beating that this guy took from Willis and Bowman and Whitner and Justin Smith and Aldon Smith, and these guys constantly going down. So as much as it sucks, that was like, it's not the best game I've ever seen. That Saints game is hands down. That's the best sporting event I've ever been to. I've been to hundreds of sporting events. That day was just perfect. But if I'm being an objective football fan, that Kyle Williams game, that's what football is all about to me. That hard hitting, hard nosed, stuff we don't see. It was 10 years ago, and half those hits in that game would have been unnecessary roughness. That really defines what I like watching in football, a tough, gritty defensive game. The other thing I would add is, I forget if it was, I'm blanking on the name of the punter, but the holder for the Giants deserves so much credit for that win, because the snap on the game-winning field goal that the Giants kicked after the Kyle Williams fumble was absolutely horrendous, and the ball went into the ground flat, and the holder somehow got it up, laces out for Lawrence Tynes to kick the field goal. So it just felt like one of those days. The reason why I bring that up is it just felt like one of those days where like everything that could have gone against the 49ers did. Like remember the Ahmad Bradshaw like fumble that wasn't what? Like there was so much that just like happened to go against them. But it felt really good because it was the first time in my lifetime that the 49ers were really playing meaningful football that I can remember. I was like 3 when I went to that game against the Packers when Terrell Owens caught the ball from Steve Young in the playoffs. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I remembered any of it. I was there, but I don't remember any of it, you know? So, that's just kind of, it sucked, but that season was so fun. And that game, now that enough time has gone by, anybody who can stomach it, they have it on Game Pass. I've watched it a couple times, and I'm like, damn, like this is what football is all about. It sucks because I think the 49ers could have beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl that year. That's another story, but it's what football is all about, man.
Absolutely, and that was also too was that the Eli Manning to Manningham pass down the sideline where he just kind of fitted in
In the
between 2
Super Bowl or
defenders
against the Niners?
against the Niners because he did it twice from my memory. Eli
I know
Manning
he did. I know he did in the regular season. I'm blanking on if he did in that game. But that year they had Victor Cruz was like dicing the Niners up that game too. Like they had a knack on third down where they were just kind of, and the Niners were like 0 for 13 on third down or something crazy in that game too. It was just
Oh, the memories. Oh, the memories. But yes, also too that Saints game was probably one of my favorite memories as a 49er fan. It was just a beautiful day. And how about I think it's a good spot to end it on. We'll end it on the good memory of the good playoff win that the 49ers had against, the Saints. Hopefully we're really, really talking about playoffs in a couple weeks from now. Obviously, we've touched on it and the reality of it. Yes, the 49ers are a game out at this point, right? But there's still a long road ahead. So we'll see. Today was fun. The vibes were immaculate. Oh, DJ wanted to know what's on the poster.
so. If you're talking about the one over here, that's Jerry Rice. It's a signed poster of him, and then this one to my left is a smaller one. It's Patrick Willis. Patrick Willis is my favorite 49er of all time. I'm obviously not going to turn down. I got a Jerry Rice one a long time ago as a gift. I think my parents got it signed by him back when athletes did signings and like it was like Macy's or somewhere and like San Bruno or something like that.
Right.
So it's been
You just
around.
pull up.
I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, you can. I don't know if you can kind of like zoom in and see it, but it's him. There's a Rams defender trying to tackle him, but yeah, got love for my guy Jerry, and then I got my my Pat Willis one here that he signed. That was the year he won Defensive Rookie of the Year. So yeah, I got some. I love collecting memorabilia, so that's kind of that's one of my like hobbies. That's why I have my bobbleheads and signed balls and
I
stuff
was
like
gonna
that.
say
But,
finish with the bobblehead lineup. Who do we got back there?
most of those are. So I have a bunch of the ones from 2014. I have the Ishikawa. I have the Pence on the Fence. I have Yusmera Petit. But I have some other fun ones. I have Russ Ortiz up there. I got that one when I was like 7. I've had that for a long time. And then I have a Rich Aurelia one. And then I think the ball up there I have is signed by Hunter Pence. I have some other
Need
cool
to
ones.
get some Niner ones up there.
I don't have any Niners ones. I have I have a Jared Goff one. I have a Steven Jackson bobblehead. I have a Logan Couture one. I have like every sport but the Niners, or like every team but the Niners. Those eBay prizes, man, they're not playing though. Like that Kittle one that was a couple years ago, that was cool. It's like 120 bucks. I'm not gonna spend $120 on a bobblehead. I looked a while ago and it was something crazy where I'm like, man, I can't justify that. But
Yeah, I really wanted I think it was the Joe Staley one, or it could have been the Kittle one. No, I think it was the Kittle one on the first National Tight End Day. I really wanted that one. Shout out my homie for being too hungover to get there early. So we missed out on it, but that happens. Quickly, Jamal asks if there are any free agents that we're keeping our eyes on. I personally have not looked that far ahead. Jordan, is there anyone that kind of been sticking out for you that you've been thinking of?
no, and this is my thing. So with football, like the best players that are going to end up hitting free agency generally never do because they end up getting franchise tagged, or they get extensions worked out, or they get traded. So my whole thing with free agency is like if you can find a guy, like a perfect example, like Alex Mack this year was a low risk signing. He didn't make a ton of money, but he filled a big need, and his impact has been felt. Guys like that, I admittedly haven't gone through and created a list of guys yet because generally I like to see how the season plays out, who's going to end up where the 49ers are probably going to have positions in need. Because my whole thing with free agency is this is how I look at it. Like I said, so the best players in free agency generally are tagged or traded. So you end up with a huge crop of players that are hitting the market, getting signed by desperate teams who are playing. They end up paying a lot of average players above average money, which is why I'm not a huge fan of actively seeking, contracts in free agency. Very rarely do you sign a free agent that ends up being a huge impact piece. But I do think that the 49ers are in a spot where they might be able to add, a corner here or we'll see how the safety spot shakes out. I would love to keep Tart for another year if they can, but he is on a 1-year deal. So it'll be interesting to see who the 49ers prioritize really on bringing back on those 1-year deals. But I think it'd be more depth than anything. So there's not, like a huge position. I know I see Jamal mentioning it. I know a lot of people really want JC Jackson. Unfortunately, unless they start moving around a lot of money, I don't see how they make it work because I think JC Jackson is going to command quite a bit of money on the open market if he doesn't go back to New England. And the 49ers are in a rough spot. They only have like 30 players signed next year, and they don't have an abundance of cap space. They also have to extend Nick Bosa. They're likely going to extend Deebo Samuel, and as great as he's playing right now, the people writing checks are probably getting sick to their stomach every week watching him rack up yards because they're going to keep having to add zeros to that check that they're writing to him. So they have to take care of their guys first. And I think that that's the sign of any good organization is taking care of the players that you drafted and developed and have produced within your own building, because it sends a message to these other guys that if you work hard, you'll be rewarded for your hard work. So I think, nobody wants to hear, a Nick Bosa and Deebo Samuel extension is the 49ers' big splash in free agency. But I think it's kind of similar to like that was their big signing this past year, was bringing back Trent Williams. While he wasn't, it wasn't like he never played for them and they brought him in. If you sign Trent Williams on the open market, you're getting the production you got from him this year. That's a huge splash. I just don't see a huge glaring need like there was clearly going into this past offseason at a position as important as left tackle. Maybe like a nickel corner, but I think that they I think they ideally is the word I was looking for, see Demo Lenore filling that role. If he can get a little bit better against the run, I think he'd be a fantastic nickel corner. I thought that's the role they envisioned when they drafted him, and it seems to make sense because they seem a little bit more reluctant to play him on the outside, and they seem far too content continuing to roll Josh Norman out there. So if they're going to continue to do that, then I, have to imagine there's some rhyme or reason to it. So we'll see.
And and my thoughts are, on the offensive line, maybe they're gonna have to figure out what they're doing at guard. Laken Tomlinson is going to be an unrestricted free agent. He has not been extended. Daniel Brunskill will be an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. So they got 2 holes at guard, and they're going to have to decide if they are going to extend or give a contract to Laken Tomlinson. Same with Daniel Brunskill. I would imagine Brunskill might likely get paid from another team. We'll see what happens with Tomlinson, but that means there could be some potential free agent movement still being added to the offensive line. We'll see. There's definitely a lot of moving parts and a lot of things left to be considered. So we'll find out, obviously, as we get closer to the offseason. But definitely discussions that will be had and something we'll definitely be talking about. Our season's year round, so we will absolutely be engaged with all the off-season movement and predictions and all that type of stuff. So we'll absolutely be here to do all of that as well. Jordan, this was a fun-ass episode. Tell the people where they can find you, follow you, and read your work.
So you can follow me on Twitter. Like I said, I'm on there quite a bit. My @'s right here on the screen. You can find me on NinersNation.com. I write a few pieces for them a week, and then I'll bounce around on various lives and stuff. I'm kind of working on doing something of my own kind of soon. I don't know if I want, there's so many great 49ers podcasts and videos and stuff up now that I'm trying to kind of find something that's a little bit different because I don't want, there's only so many, and there's, like I said, there's already so many fantastic content creators doing stuff like that. So if I do anything like that, I'll keep you guys updated. But in the meantime, you can find me here on Fridays, and every once in a while, if you follow me on Twitter, I do try to plug anytime I do somebody else's show or something like that. So that's kind of the main spots you can find me. Oh, and also I see in the comments too, we need a Jason Aponte bobblehead because this man is big time. Let me tell you, this guy. I'm 6'2". I rarely feel like small next to people. Jason's like 6'5", this big, tall, person walking around. We're walking down Tasman Drive, which is the street Levi's is on in Santa Clara during training camp. And this man had people stopping in traffic in the middle of the street to stick their heads out the window and tell them how big of fans they were. So, he's very humble. He'll never let you hear it from him, but this man is Hollywood through and through, big time celebrity. So I think we do need a Jason Aponte bobblehead. I don't know if mine would sell as good, but that Aponte ball, but especially if we get it with him in like the big pea coat with the turtleneck looking at his phone, that would be $1 billion idea. So if it works, I think the chat deserves a cut of it because they are really bringing the inspiration here.
Absolutely. If not, we'll do an NFT. We'll do something. We'll figure out how to get Jason's face out there because I agree. Hollywood Jason coming through. We got a big week ahead of us. We got a big game in front of us. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what comes of it. Really, really excited. But we thank all of you guys in the chat for vibing with us and always enjoying engaging with us throughout the show. It's always a lot of fun. Jordan, thank you as always for joining me on Fridays. I was talking with Jason, and I'll talk to you offline a little bit more about this, but I think I want to maybe get you guys more involved in the channel. So we'll get that figured out and maybe have some more stuff for you guys next week. But until then, big game. Got to get that dub against the Jags. Hopefully the vibe check next week is still a good one. And we'll be back talking about a 49ers W. But until then, you all be safe and have a great